Why won't this thing just work? Oh my gosh. So I have to put the coordinate system on top of my bullet, and then I have to subtract for the size of the target so that it hits the center. Oh, that's all it took? Some subtraction? That's ridiculous. Can't believe it's that easy. Well, looks like it's almost done then. Welcome to another Code Jam. In this video, I'm going to be building a shooting gallery in Rust and Bevy. A shooting gallery is typically found at a carnival or at Disneyland, and they have a bunch of different things animating across you or moving across the stall as you try to shoot them to get points. So I'm going to use some assets from Kenney.nl again because these assets are wonderful. They just so happen to have a whole set of sprites with their sprite sheets and XML coordinate systems ready to go, which makes building this really easy because I don't do graphics, I just program. This lets me get started really quickly because I have all these great PNG files that have their coordinates set up, so I can just kind of copy and paste them into my Rust code and start setting up some sprites. So with any great shooting gallery, you need to have a thing called a stall. And the stall is basically where everything is, the targets and the background and the different moving parts. So I want to build out the stall from top to bottom, just like in this preview image that Kenney.nl provides. It shows kind of a final product of using this sprite sheet. So I'm going to build out this stall slowly. It's not going to be that exciting, but I'm going to build out the curtains and the grass and the water and the clouds and the trees, and then I'm going to animate them. And it's a laborious process if you don't know how to use sprites, which I don't really know how to use them. I've used them here and there, but I don't fully have the great experience with them. So I'm going to learn how to use them as I build this. So I might be doing things in the wonkiest way possible to get them set up. But from my understanding, you have a screen with a window. You have sprites. In the current mode, they're pixel based. So I can draw my sprites on the screen using pixels and repeat them as a pattern to make them show up as a larger version of that, like a tile. And this happens in web development as well with background images or other CSS type tricks. And I'm sure it happens in other UI type situations as well. So sprites are just like background images if you're from a web development background. And that's kind of where my background is. I've done a lot of mobile games, websites, servers, apps, and APIs and all that. So this is kind of trying to reuse my CSS and HTML skills and software skills as a game developer with Rust. And I've written games in Unity, but not with sprites. So as we watch, you'll see it start to speed up as I figure out how to do things more efficiently. I end up writing a while loop to tile out our top curtain. And then I copy paste that top curtain while loop to make our sub curtain here. And then we can start adding more and more sprites. So I'm going to just start importing like crazy, throwing the side curtains in there, getting them set up on the side of the screen here, getting the kind of framing the stall. It kind of makes our frame of reference for the shooting gallery to have a nice set of curtains to put all of our content inside of. It allows the user to kind of see that they can only shoot with inside the stall. So it seems like there was a missing sprite for the bottom wood, so I just used the same wood to do the bottom half of the stall. I was a little confused because in the original demo image from Kenney, there was a different type of wood texture that looks like is being used across the bottom to show the, I guess, the front of the stall where the player is standing. So not finding that in the texture bundle, I just reused the same wood texture that's for the very background as the front of the stall. Not super excited about it, but it works. And now I'm going to put the actual background in. And we're trying to get all this just set up so it looks great. We're going to add the grass in now. There's two different kinds of grasses that are used, and we just do that to make it look more varied. So I alternate the grasses from one type to the other to kind of give it a more dynamic look. I wouldn't call it dynamic, but it looks dynamic because I'm using two different sprite textures and putting them in a row and lining them up nicely. They kind of don't offset as well as I'd like to, so I had to tweak them a little bit, but I got them working. Luckily, grass doesn't move, so it's not that big of a deal. Now we're moving on to the next part, which gets a little harder. We have to put some other things in there that do have to move, starting with water. And in any great shooting gallery, the water goes back and forth. So we have two types of water textures here. I call them the front water and the back water. So I get them nicely lined up here, and then I want to get them to animate across the screen. First off, I need to get them kind of set up. So I get them all lined up nicely. I kind of want to make it match this demo image as good as possible. And here I decided to clean up my code a little just because I'm getting a little confused with my sprites. Because at the moment, they're just index numbers or indices within a big vector of sprites, and I don't really know which one's which, so I decided to label them. But here I'm getting my water good to go. The Y values need to be tweaked because they're too close to each other. But I'm happy with that. I'm going to move on to my trees. And the trees are, I should have put more than two, but I wanted to copy this image, like I said, almost exactly. So I put my trees in almost the exact same place as the Kenney photo. Probably to a fault, because why is that one pine tree in the water? Who knows? Only Kenney can tell us. So here I just start fiddling about with all the positioning of things. I want to make sure that it looks great. I want to make sure that the depth of my stall kind of comes out as clear as possible to the shooter, the user, the player, because otherwise it's going to look kind of wonky. So I spend quite a bit of time, what I would call fine-tuning. This is probably the last time I really fine-tuned the positioning of everything. I felt like this was the best time to do it because I had all the basic elements, the clouds, the background, the grass, the trees, and the water, and I wanted to make sure they were all kind of ready to go. Now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to import a bunch of other sprites. And I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to import all these things one at a time, so I'm going to use some nice copy-pasting skills here. And then I realized, hey, this is getting kind of laborious. I'm just going to start doing some hotkey stuff and editing multiple rows at once and save myself a little bit of time, because that's a lot of sprites to import. So again, I'm not a sprite expert. If somebody has a better way of doing this, I'd love to hear it, because this seems kind of crazy. I've imported each number from my sprite sheet, 0 through 9, and that'll allow me to show the score and the time. I've also chosen to import the other HUD items, which would be the colon, the plus sign, and the crosshairs for the gun. So now I'm going to start drawing the HUD, the heads-up display. It's not quite a great HUD, because I don't have much on there, but I have the clock and I have the score. It's technically should be called the UI, but because I'm not using the UI camera here, I'm going to actually build them in the game with number systems. They're going to be actual entities within the games that are being animated within the game by swapping out the sprites. I don't really want to call it the UI because I don't want to confuse anybody, because it's not using Bevy UI, it's using the sprite sheets and building out a HUD with textures. So it's kind of a cool setup I got there, and then I'm now going to start trying to animate. And the animation is a little bit confusing because I had to figure out how to query all of my parts of the stall easily. So I went through a couple different iterations of querying our Bevy app for each part of the game. And here I'm just kind of like banging my head against the wall a little bit because I don't really understand what I'm looking at, because I think I'm looking at the old Bevy docs, but I'm using Bevy 0.5 from the Get main branch. So I had to kind of rewrite the code a couple times because I was looking at the wrong docs and it was confusing me. Getting the animate system was actually a pretty fun endeavor because I didn't understand exactly what I was trying to accomplish until I finished. The main thing I was trying to figure out was what I wanted to animate and how to animate it. But along the way, I had to learn a little bit more about how Bevy handles fixed updates, as well as the way it does querying of multiple entities or game components. So I used that to figure out that there was a lot of things that you can do inside Bevy that are not safe, that they prevent you from doing, because technically you could query for sprite sheet bundles with clouds and animate them, but then later you can query for sprite sheet bundles with water and animate those. And that sounds great on paper, but what if I were to say animate characters, and one of those characters was a player and one of them was an enemy? Well, this prevents you from trying to animate two different things or the same object twice, or run a function against it on a fixed update and kind of using it twice in the same loop. They have a lot of tools in place to prevent multiple owners of the same object per update loop. So I didn't realize that until I tried to animate the stall all at once right here, and I was getting a lot of issues with it. So I used this thing called a query set to help solve that problem. And that's Bevy's way of creating a more type-safe and mutability-safe version of transforming things or querying things within the game. And obviously you can see here I have no idea what I'm doing with animation, because my water looks like it's got something going on with it, like a disease. I ended up solving the problem of my water being weird by making it animate perfectly, which you saw there. It was moving, but it was moving perfectly in sync with itself, so it didn't actually look like it was moving. And then I said, hey, why don't I just flip one of the waters to go the opposite direction? So I flipped them around and then realized that my math was wrong because I don't do math very often, apparently. And here I am trying to just kind of work through the water animation. The clouds look great, though. You have to admit, the clouds are looking stupendous. They're going really fast. Now they're going really slow. But here I have a near perfect animation of water and clouds. I just have to get the coordinates set up a little nicer on the water so it doesn't glitch over itself. And here I think it's looking pretty good. The water's moving, the clouds are moving. I just have to make sure that the water's drawn all the way across outside the screen so that when it shows up on the corners, it doesn't get like chopped off. So I go through a lot of iterations to just make sure it looks great. And it looks like the reference demo example as well. So I have my great animated stall. I'm going to start doing the more fun stuff. Count down the clock. And the clock, I can just rip off the code that I just did for animating clouds and water to animate, in a way, the numbers counting down. Now, of course, here's some more math, which is always fun. But because we have a integer of seconds and we want to convert that to a minute and seconds under 60 seconds. So we have to do some different kinds of math here. And then we also have to attach components to each part of the clock in the game to target them. So we have our minutes hand, our colon, our tens of seconds, and our seconds. We want to be able to match them in Rust with our position they are. So I have this nice little match statement here to find my clock pieces, modify them as the game clock counts down. And each one has a slightly different algorithm. So I'm trying to kind of figure out this algorithm live in front of the camera to count down the clock. So here I have it going down to 0. Let's see what happens when it gets to 0. Oh, almost there. Looking better. Almost, but I'm trying to tweak it a little because there's a little bit of a bug. There we go. Now we have a clock. The next logical step in our game is to have something to use with the mouse. And then in this case, it's going to be a rifle. And we need to track our mouse movement to move our rifle around the screen. Because if you have a shooting gallery, you typically have a rifle. And if you have a rifle, you need to be able to move it. So I need to import the rifle sprite and the crosshairs. And I need to hook up our mouse events from Bevy into our sprite. So I create this rifle struct to attach to our sprite sheet bundle. I gave it some ammo because I just thought maybe I'll add some ammo into the game if I have time. I didn't actually add any ammo. You have unlimited ammo, everybody. I need to import the rifle and set it up with the mouse. So right now it's just smack dab in the middle screen. And I need to kind of map it to our mouse. And that's not that hard, except I first have to just make sure I have it hooked up to our mouse event system. And I had to learn about that a little bit in Bevy because it's different than the other ways I'm used to doing it. In JavaScript, it's pretty easy. In Unity, it's It's slightly easy. And then Bevy I thought was somewhere in the middle. It makes perfect sense how it works. It gives you back an object that gives you information about the mouse's current location. And this function fires every time the mouse is moving on some kind of fixed basis, I believe. So I was able to really easily figure out that part of it. So you can see I have the rifle moving around with the mouse really easily. The cursor shows up, which is fine, but I have to first make sure it stays on the stage. I don't want the mouse to go off screen and mess up our rifle. And then I want to set up the crosshair to be slightly above and to the left of our rifle, because the rifle is kind of angled to the left and showing you its left side of its body. So we want to put the cursor just up and to the left of it. So here I am trying to get the cursor, or I call it the cursor, but I meant to say the crosshair. We want the crosshair to be just up and to the left of the rifle. So here I am trying to get the cursor or crosshair to basically line up with our rifle in a satisfactory way. And that's fairly straightforward because I've already done all the hard work of getting the rifle to set up. So now I just have to kind of put the cursor and crosshair outside of that area to the left. So even though it sounds easy on paper, I've made a little bit of a mistake and I put it the wrong direction, but I get it figured out eventually. You'll see later that I have a bug here that I soon realize, because I'll give you a hint. I'm positioning everything on the rifle and not the crosshairs. So the cursor is attached to the rifle. So when the player comes to shoot later, we'll have a bug because the cursor needs to be attached to the crosshair. And I even said it before, cursor and crosshair. I know that it has to be connected, but somehow I wrote it as the rifle is where the cursor is, which means we'll have a bug later. After that, I turn the actual mouse cursor off and I switch on to adding a couple different input events for the mouse. If you click left click, it's going to fire your gun. I wanted to add a right click to reload, but for now we didn't do that. I'm just debugging something here to see how it works. And then I can figure out that if I use that, I can attach to the left click event and make the button turn the rifle red, kind of like Duck Hunt where it flashes the whole screen, but instead the rifle just changes colors. And I can also change the cursor or the crosshair to be a different color, so that kind of gives you a visual feedback of the gun being shot. There I had a bug though where the gun just disappeared altogether. That was great. There you have it though. You saw the gun was flashing. Now I'm going to work on the score. So we have a score, and we kind of have the number system built out nicely because of the clock I built earlier. So we already have all the numbers imported. I just have to add a separate section for the score. I'm going to put the score in the top right corner and use the same digits I was using before. I hard-coded my game to only support up to 4 digits, which gives you a hypothetical max score of 9,999. And then if you go over that, the game will probably break. The digits would reset. I didn't actually test to see what happens. I kind of forgot. Maybe I did. I don't remember. Long story short, you shouldn't be able to get past 10,000 points. But if you do, congratulations. Send me a screenshot and I'll believe you. Maybe you cheated though. There is one way to get there. So here I am trying to use the same kind of matching scheme I wrote for the clock, but I'm doing it instead for digits. I have thousands and hundreds and ones and tens to score out your game and change the sprite index. So the overall goal of all that is to basically you have your sprite index of your numbers, then you can change the sprite index to point to the right sprite when the score changes. Now I'm going to set up the targets, which I'm going to grab a couple of circle targets and some duck targets. I like this duck with the little target on its body. Kind of reminds me of Disneyland for some reason, because they have that nice little shooting gallery in Pioneer Land. So I grab all these targets, I set them up in the same way. I kind of want them to be in the back just like the Kenney demo. I put them on these little sticks that they give you from the sprite sheet to kind of make the targets look like they're floating on a stick, giving you that sense of reality that you're actually at a shooting gallery and not playing a video game. So I'm trying to put this duck here inside the water, just like the Kenney reference image. And then I'm trying to put all these targets in the back area in different ways. And the real goal here is to put them on here and then animate them across the screen so they are hard to shoot, because you don't want them to just stick around and be easy to shoot. So I add this struct to each target called a target struct that provides a velocity of the target to allow it to be configured and have its own speed as it animates across the screen. And I use that to help give it not only its speed, but its current points. So I can set the speed and points of each target really easily using Bevy and Rust. I thought that came out pretty great because then these really slow ducks in the middle have really low points, and those faster moving targets have high points. And that made the game more fun, obviously, because now we have different points and different challenges. So you can get a high score based on how great you are at shooting these little quick moving targets. So here's kind of a preview of that. I was trying to make it so that it was a little bit easier for the back target to be shot, even though it doesn't seem that way. I also wanted to add one more extremely hard to hit target that floats up and down and has more points. So I created this other target to have a different animation. I kind of did it hackily with a is up down boolean. If a target has an is up down boolean, it lets it go up and down in the stall and kind of bounce around the screen a little bit more instead of just going straight across, to give it a little bit more of an extra pizzazz, if you will. Now that I got that figured out, I'm going to start working on the point system, which means if a rifle shoots a target, the user should get points. And this is where I found my bug, because I'm trying to target the gun. You saw in the very beginning of the video when I'm arguing with myself. I'm trying to shoot the gun on the target, and then I finally realized my logic was fine, but the cursor was tied to the rifle, not the crosshair. So every time I shot the rifle, it was not hitting, because the cursor is not attached to the right object. So the user is actually confused. Therefore, I figured out, hey, I just moved the rifle on top of the target. I got points. So I rewrote the code a little bit and modified where the rifle is displayed and the cursor is displayed for the crosshair. And that solved my problem. And now I'm able to do scores and keep track of your points and get the game up and running. So I'm just trying to clean it up. I'm working on the game over scene a little bit, because after a minute and 30 seconds, the game resets. So I wanted to make sure the users could play a new game if they want to get a better score after they've warmed up, basically. And the end result, I thought, came out pretty great thanks to Bevy and Rust. Again, this code's available on my GitHub. A link is in the description. Please subscribe if you like my videos.